Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Film for Fans podcast, the podcast from movie fans for movie fans. I am your host, Ryan Dunlevy, joined by my co-host, Rob Dunham.
Hi, everybody.
Awesome. Well, we're back live in person.
Live and direct.
Rob has a voice this week.
Yes.
Which is always good.
It is very good. I did not have a voice last Friday.
Yeah. So thanks to Dave Dixon for pinch hitting for us. But we have an excellent show for you. We are going to, of course, talk about the box office and the continued dominance of Mario. We will have a number of movies opening up this weekend we'll talk about. And then we're beginning what will turn out to be a months-long discussion.
Some might call it an impossible mission.
Some might call it an impossible mission, where we are going to go through in detail all of the Mission Impossible movies leading up to the newest one coming out. But we'll detail that a little bit later. And of course, we will hit our watch list. All right, Rob, you ready to get started?
I'm as awake as I'm going to be, so let's get recording.
Well, it's almost 3 p.m. I hope so. Awesome. Okay. So first up, let's have the box office. And the box office results are as follows. Number one for the third week in a row, $59.9 million. Super Mario Brothers movie. 436 million domestically in 3 weeks.
Let's talk about how briefly how crazy it is that it made $60 million on its third week.
Yeah. The drop-offs for this movie have been very small.
Yeah.
Considering normal box office trends. Pretty crazy.
Yeah, almost every movie is hoping for $60 million its opening week.
Yeah. Like this is this year's Top Gun Maverick. And a movie that there was more anticipation for Top Gun Maverick, obviously.
Yeah.
But the level of interest in it far surpassed everything else.
Yeah.
The interest level in Mario Brothers is incredible. And nobody saw this coming at this level. And like we talked about a few weeks ago, this is not a franchise per se, like some of the other ones who are up on that list are. But it keeps climbing the list of all times. Like this is now in the all-time movie list in terms of box office numbers. So that was in at number one. Evil Dead Rise in its first week was at number two, hitting right about the normal mark for a horror movie in week one, 24.5 million. The Covenant, another kind of horror-ish, or no, that's not the horror movie. The Covenant was the movie, the Guy Ritchie movie.
Yes.
That did 6.4 million. John Wick Chapter 4 did 5.8 million. And Dungeons and Dragons back up in the top 5 did 5.5 million. It had fallen out of the top 5 and now back in. So John Wick is at 169 domestically, Dungeons and Dragons at 82 million. Observations. What are your thoughts?
I mean, once again, we talk about it all the time. Horror movies. If you make a good horror movie, you've got a good studio behind it. You've got $20 to $30 million in the bank. Just seems like. And I was going to go see this movie on Friday, and then I was sick, so I had the unfortunate experience. Probably only people who go to a lot of movies have had this experience. Maybe you even haven't had this, but when you have bought a ticket and you actually have to give it to someone else because you can't go because you already physically bought it. That was a hard one for me.
I don't know if I've had that specifically. I've bought tickets for a group and had people back out, which I've had to find other people for those tickets. But I don't know that I've done that. I've had to leave a movie before, or I've had to cancel going, but I didn't buy a ticket. So
I bought the ticket a couple of days before in anticipation, and then the day of, we realized it was not going to happen.
Although I will say I did have one where I bought a ticket for a specific showtime and then ran into an accident on the highway and couldn't make that showtime, and then had to buy a ticket for the later showtime, which is not fun. Hey, let's pay double for the same movie.
Yeah, missing any movie that you're supposed to go see, no matter the circumstances, is a sad story.
I would say the Covenant, I would maybe anticipating a little bit more. However, it was a very crowded box office.
Yes.
I will say, too, they really promoted it as Guy Ritchie's The Covenant. I think that's always a little bit of a warning sign when you have to like overly promote who the director is to get people to want to see.
It is also kind of strange because it's so different from anything he's ever done before.
Yeah. I'm still interested in it. I think it looks like a good movie, and I'm trying to decide. I want to see one maybe tonight, and I'm trying to decide between The Covenant and Super Mario Brothers. I'm probably more interested in The Covenant.
Pretty much the same.
Well, I'm probably more interested in The Covenant, but I mean, how do I not go see a movie that's having the kind of impact that Super Mario Brothers is having? So, yeah,
I did see Super Mario Brothers for the second time over the weekend. When I went to visit my brother in Scranton and watched college baseball in the rain for 2 hours.
Oh, fun.
That's why I got sick.
I see that. Yes. Anything else? Observations from any of that?
No, I'm just really interested in seeing how long Mario is going to stick around. What kind of legs does it have?
Yeah, that's the key now, because the ones that get into the very tippy top have long runs. They start out big and they have long runs. Yeah. So we will see on that front.
So I think everyone can agree it's Ryan's civic duty to go see Mario. So keep that good momentum going.
It is true. I've had a lot of people ask me about it, and I just haven't gotten
for the people. Because that's what
the people.
That's what we do here on the podcast.
That's what we do.
Yes. For fans, film for
fans. Exactly. Yes. So maybe
not film for us.
Film
for me.
For the fans. So it would be fan service, I guess. You got to see Mario Brothers. All right. So that's the box office from this past weekend. We have 5 more movies opening up. We're getting a lot of smaller movies open up in the last few weeks. Everything's kind of rolling out before we get into the summer blockbusters, and sneak preview next week we'll be doing a preview of all the May movies because there are May crowded.
Yep.
So we'll get to that next week. But opening up this week, we have several. One is Big George Foreman. There's several of these that have long titles. The official title of this is Big George Foreman, the miraculous story of the once and future heavyweight champion of the world.
Nice, short, concise title there.
I know, like couldn't workshop that one a little bit.
Yeah.
Do we need 10, 15 words in that title? Probably not.
Well, considering the fact he named all of his boys George Foreman, maybe they can even make clear which one they were talking about.
Yeah. He did. He literally named all of his boys George Foreman.
Yeah.
And this is probably going to be a revelation to our younger audience, and the younger audience in general, that this is not a story about the guy who created the grill.
I mean, it's about him, but it's
about him, but it's not about the creation of the grill.
Yeah.
He actually did something before the creation of the grill.
Yeah.
So, yeah. The description on this one in IMDb is fantastic. It is literally shorter than the title of the movie. The Life and Boxing Career of George Foreman.
Nice.
That is the IMDb description of this movie. So Chris Davis plays George Foreman, also stars Jasmine Matthews and Sullivan Jones. So yes, you're getting a boxing story. It's a biopic about George Foreman. So if you are a boxing fan or if you're familiar with George Foreman, he also had a short-lived TV comedy series called George, I think in the late 90s or the mid 90s or somewhere around this. Next one up, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Another title not going with the brevity. And this is when her family moves from the city to the suburbs. 11-year-old Margaret navigates new friends, feelings, and the beginnings of adolescence. And this one stars Abby Ryder, Rachel McAdams, Kathy Bates, and Ben Safdie. So there's another one. Then we have Polite Society. And Polite Society is a movie which I'm attempting to pull up the description of. And it's, technology always works great until it doesn't. And I believe I think this is Indian cinema as well, but it's Ria Khan believes she must save her older sister Leah from her impending marriage. After enlisting her friend's help, she attempts to pull off the most ambitious of all wedding heists in the name of independence and sisterhood. So I don't know if it's Indian cinema or not. I think the main characters are Indian. Priya Kanasara, Rita Araya, and Renu Brindle are the main characters on this one. And next one we have is Sisu. And Sisu is when an ex-soldier discovers gold in Lampland Wilderness, tries to take the loot in the city. Nazi soldiers, led by a brutal SS officer, battle him. So this one is back in theaters. Jorma Tomalia and Axel Henny and Jack Doolin. Because, yeah, I don't know how to pronounce these names very well. And lastly, we have the 40th anniversary Return of the Jedi. It is back in theaters this weekend for the 40th anniversary of that movie. So that's going to be playing in a cinema near you as well.
I may have just gotten my May the 4th shirts yesterday.
Hey, all right.
Holiday coming up.
Yes. All right. So you have a number of different options in here, Rob. What would you go see?
So I'm very intrigued by Sisu because I keep on seeing more ads about it, and it looks stylish. It looks interesting. It looks like it has action. The most recent commercial I saw for it said, "Think John Wick as a period piece," and had a review from Sam Raimi, who is horror / Spider-Man director.
Yeah,
saying that he really enjoyed it. So I'm very, as I said, intrigued by what this movie might be like. And out of all the movies that you mentioned, I mean, obviously Return of the Jedi, you want to watch that because you just do. But out of the new movies coming out, that's by far the one I'm most interested in.
Yeah, Sisu seems interesting. Big George Foreman is kind of intriguing too. George Foreman is an interesting character, and I think there's some intrigue there. But I would probably say Sisu of the new movies that would come in. But it's going to be really tempting to go see Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Man, yeah, it's going to be really tempting. Because I don't know if I've ever seen Return of the Jedi in theaters. I know when they re-released like the special editions, so I don't think I ever got to see Return of the Jedi.
I went to see all 3 of the special editions when they came out in the theaters when I was a teenager.
I know I went to the first one. I know I went to Star Wars. I don't know that I went to the other 2. I don't remember. So because I don't remember, that might be more of a reason to go see Return of the Jedi. Okay, so that's what's in the box office for this week. So lots and lots of choices. If you have not gotten, there's plenty of options for anything you want to see in the theaters this weekend. So it's going to be rainy on the East Coast, so it's a perfect opportunity to spend your weekend at the movies. Now we get into our feature, our discussion for the day.
This podcast will not self-destruct, just so you know.
No, not in 5 seconds and not ever, because this is what we do. We're that good.
For the people.
For the people. But in the run-up, okay, I have a slight confession to make, which I will do first before I say how this is going to go. We are going to do, I'll confess in a moment, we are going to do a long lead up to the opening of Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, which comes out July 14th. And between now and then, we will, every other week or so, we will go through the Mission Impossible movies in order. We'll break them down, we'll analyze them, we'll talk about each particular film, and then we'll have some other features like ranking them and like pulling out the best scenes from the series and some preview podcasts. Hopefully then we'll also have on the release day, we'll be doing a live preview show and an instant reaction after the movie. That's the goal, is to get a group together and do some of that things in the lead up to that movie. Now, why did we start doing our Mission Impossible preview several months before the release of the movie? And the answer to that is I thought this movie came out in May. I did. For the longest time, I thought Mission Impossible was coming out in May. So I set the schedule of when we were going to do this. And then I realized, it comes out not in May. It comes out in July, which is several months after May.
Well, in fact, 2 months, just a couple.
So all of a sudden, like what was supposed to be a 5-week series turns into, well, I'm not going to do like 10 weeks on Mission Impossible. Yeah. But there are 6 films and there are a couple other things we want to get to. So we're going to stretch it out over a number of months. So we're starting today with our review of Mission Impossible, the first movie, Mission Impossible. So we'll have a format for how we're going to do this, and we're going to post these on the website. So make sure you visit filmforfans.com because there will be write-ups on each one of these movies as we go through. But today we're doing Mission Impossible. And this movie debuted on May 22nd, 1996. It came with a budget of $80 million. It did $45 million in its opening weekend. Domestically, the movie had a $180 million run domestically and $457 million globally. So this was a monster movie in 1996.
It's a monster budget in 1996.
Yeah. Considering, I think John Wick films, I think the third John Wick film was the first one to approach $80 million in budget.
And I mean, although, he was not an unknown, obviously, with the success of Top Gun, etc. Tom Cruise in 1996 was not the Tom Cruise that we have now. So the budget being spent on that was still, I think, a fairly significant gamble for them.
Yeah, and it was directed by Brian De Palma, and it was written by Bruce Geller. Bruce Geller gets a writing credit because he was the TV series writer, and he was involved a little bit. David Kopp, Steve Zillian, and Robert Towne got writer credits on this one. And the main cast was Tom Cruise, John Voight, Emmanuel Bert, Jean Reno, and Ving Rhames, along with there's some other ones who were in there briefly. But those are the cast that were in the majority of the movie. The basics of the plot for this movie is an American agent under false suspicion for disloyalty must discover and expose the real spy without help from his organization. So this is a classic spy film, Rob. So to kind of start off with, do you remember, when was the first time you saw this Mission Impossible movie?
I don't think I saw this in the theater, so I think it was probably a year or so after it came out that I saw it.
Yeah, because we were both teenagers when this came out. So you saw it fairly close to right after when it came out. Yeah, I was in a similar boat. I don't remember seeing it in theaters. However, I do remember like it was one I watched it pretty close to when it came out when it came out on video. What do you remember from watching it in the early days when you first saw it, or early days back in the?
I think I remember thinking the action was pretty cool, and that Tom Cruise is pretty cool.
Yeah,
and it was like not just nonstop. Not a whole lot of movies necessarily like that. Although in the 90s, it seemed like they started to ramp into that kind of, I would say 90s to early to mid 2000s. You had a lot of, Matrix, etc. Movies that really just kind of tried to push the envelope when it came to action. I think they kind of fed off each other. I think this was one of the early progenitors of that trend.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not 100% sure, but this might have been one of the first true spy movies I saw. I don't know if I had seen any of the Bond movies before that, any of the Pierce Brosnan movies or anything along those lines. So I'm not sure. It might have been my introduction into the spy genre. I remember being fascinated with this movie, to the point where I basically borrowed the plot line of this movie to write an English paper where we were supposed to write a story. I totally cribbed the plot points in the general script on some of this to write my story, and I had a very good grade on it. So I don't know what that says, but
your teacher didn't watch movies.
That my teacher did not watch movies, and that there's a strength to the story overall. So give me observations, anything that stuck out to you because you rewatched it this week. I've rewatched it recently. Anything that stuck out to you, just general observation? We're going to do strengths, weaknesses. We'll do scenes, favorite scenes, and that
sort of stuff. It's a general observation. They did a good job of creating a group cast, and we talked about this with Guy Ritchie, in particular, but some other directors, Wes Anderson, directors like that. In order for a movie like this to succeed, you've got to have a crew.
Yeah,
because Ethan Hunt, although an amazing character, is a man.
Yeah,
he's not a superhero,
right?
And he's also not James Bond. Although James Bond, has a team behind him, he kind of operates more on his own. In fact, that's kind of his thing. That he is a lone wolf.
Yeah.
Mission Impossible really leans the other way in that the missions do not succeed unless the entire team succeeds. And you've got to cast the right people in those roles for it to be believable. Some of them have to be funny. Some of them have to be serious. They all have to be adept and technically proficient at what they're doing. You have to make it make sense. So there's a lot of moving parts in the Mission Impossible movies. And this one set, I think, a fairly good standard for what that would become.
Yeah, I go back and forth on whether this is the most unique of the series or if 2 is the most unique of the series. Unique doesn't necessarily mean good or bad. It just means,
especially not if we're talking about 2, but that's for another week.
That's for another week. But both.
Did I just hear some doves fly?
We're not talking about 2 yet. But 1 and 2 are both very much stand apart from the rest of the films. 1 in a more positive way for most of the fans of the series, 2 in a more negative way for most of the series for the fans. But as to which one is the most unique, it's hard to say. But it's one of the most unique of the movies, and it was really the standard bearer. I think it did such a good job of exemplifying exactly what a spy film is. I would call it the archetype of a spy film. Not a stereotype, but an archetype of a spy film. It really is one of the best representatives of the way a spy film operates. There's lots of misdirection. There's lots of in and outs. There's lots of technology. There's lots of travel all over the place. Lots of intrigue and suspense and action, like all that combination. I think this movie exemplifies it. I also think I've seen a few episodes here or there of the original TV series, but from everything I understand, it did the best. It did such a great job of carrying forth kind of the theme and the feel of the TV series into movie form with updated towards the era at the time.
Yeah, I've never had a chance to see any of the TV show, so I'm not sure how well it translates. So I have heard similar things about it.
Yeah. Other observations from the movie.
Like you said, it did a good job of setting that precedent of having multiple locations that are actually there for a reason.
Yeah.
Because you can shoot in a lot of different places just for it to look pretty, and not really have a reason.
Yeah.
But I think there's a reason behind all the places, and I feel like they've pretty much carried that forward throughout all the movies. And it provides unique backdrops and settings where there's opportunities to do things and try things. And the
whole movie just feels slick and cool, and gives you the vibe of a secret special agency. It's a really interesting film from that aspect. And I think it does a great job establishing, in particular, the character of Ethan Hunt, because there's a lot about that character that gets established in that movie that they carry over in some of the other movies. Like in certain movies, they'll pick out a different aspect of the character that was created originally in Mission Impossible, and they'll revisit that aspect of the character in later films. And so despite what we'll get to this when we get to potential weaknesses, but despite some of what we consider as weaknesses of the character, there's a lot there that they're still pulling aspects out of it 6-7 movies down the pipe. Any other general observations? We go to strengths and weaknesses.
I think we can move on.
Okay, strengths. Let's hit strengths first. What do you view as strengths of the movie?
I think I mentioned this earlier, but the pacing of the movie absolutely. I feel is a real strength.
Yes,
it doesn't feel like it really lets down at any point. You're constantly on that knife's edge of, that tension, and I think exemplified by the scene at Langley, the headquarters where they're trying to break in.
Yeah,
because there's this taut tension, not to be playing off the rope that's literally lowering him to the ground, but not quite the ground because they don't want to touch the ground.
Right.
But there's just this overwhelming feeling of you're on the edge of your seat.
Yeah.
Throughout the whole movie that I think they did a really good job of executing.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the strengths of the film is the way it revisits things that already established. Early in the film, it establishes particular ways that particular methods, particular interactions, particular ways of doing things, and then revisits them later in the film. For instance, like the use of the video, the code words and the video to give him his mission, which then self-destructs in 5 seconds. That whole thing is established early and then it's revisited later. There's the technology. All the technology that is used to wrap up the story is present earlier in the film and established early in the film. So it does a great job of kind of establishing the ground rules, establishing the world in which you're coming into, and then using that and revisiting those things later. So it doesn't run into any Deus Ex Machina issues or where they're just coming up with something random that you don't know. Like all of it is established early on and then used throughout the film, which I think is an excellent job of writing and planning. What else you got?
Mentioned already, but the casting of Tom Cruise as this character, I think, is what made this series a success.
Yeah.
So I think that's a major strength because I don't know of many people who would have been able to continue to do what he's doing. Not that they would have known 25 years later he'd still be able to do stunts and stuff, but they picked the right person.
Yeah.
Whether you think he's a crazy wackadoodle in real life or not, he is. He is fantastically suited for this role.
He is a lot of things. He is a crazy person. He is also someone who has a fantastic understanding of cinema, action, movies, and just an absolute ruthless attention to detail and ruthless drive himself. And so, yeah, that was a huge piece of this. I think too, the title sequence is a strength. Like that, that whole thing, like it just establishes, again, it's another thing that establishes that feel of like, this is a spy film. It's connection to the past series, but it's also like, these are the spy films. This is what a spy genre film looks like. So I think that's another.
I mean, even just strength. the main theme. Everybody knows the Mission Impossible theme.
Yeah.
Even if you've never seen a Mission Impossible movie, you probably know the Mission Impossible theme because you've heard it somewhere.
Yeah. I thought the cinematography was really fascinating in this film. There are some super interesting camera angles in particular, and the way Brian De Palma films it in such a way to create tension. Like there's, in particular, and we'll talk about the scene later, but there's the scene in the cafe with Kittredge near the beginning of the movie where, they're basically telling him like this was a mole hunt and you're under suspicion. The scene starts out with a normal camera angle shots back and forth between the two characters. And then right about the time Ethan Hunt starts getting the feel that something's missing, it switches. So instead of the character the character's face being straight up and down, like a 90-degree angles to the screen, switches it to it's about like 75 degrees. And it goes back and forth between him and Kittredge, and Ethan Hunt is 75 degrees left and Kittredge is 75 degrees right. So that interesting framing creates a sense of tension. It's slightly from below, it's slightly looking up at their faces and tilted slightly to the side. And that tilt slightly to the side is used throughout the movie. And it always is used to denote like a change in danger level, a change in demeanor, a change in like ramping up the tension. And so it's fascinating how they use that little bit of camera work in there. So I thought the cinematography was really, really good. And we'll talk about that more when we get to some of the other scenes. Anything else on strengths?
I don't think so.
Okay. Weaknesses. What are the weaknesses of Mission Impossible? If you can.
I mean, it's not really a fault of its, of the movie itself, but with any action movie, with any movie centered around technology, things are going to feel dated.
Yeah.
When you go to watch it, and that's just, it's the same thing with James Bond.
Yeah.
That's just what's going to happen. Yeah. 20 years from now, people will look at the movies from now and say that's dated.
Yeah. Yeah. The technology is definitely dated. I don't know how a younger generation views that. I see it and I see it as nostalgic. Oh, that's really interesting. It doesn't bother me, but maybe that's just because like I was alive then. Yeah. And I remember living through that era of technology. I think it's fascinating. I think where it shows up most is when he just goes randomly searching for the Job. Yeah. The Job thing. Like the internet was so much smaller in those days that like you literally could potentially find the person you're looking for on a random message board.
Yeah.
That's not even feasible in any way, shape, or form. These days it's so that like that's where I think it shows up most. Yeah. One of the criticisms leveled about this movie is that some people feel as though the plot is too complicated and it's too difficult to follow. How do you think about that? Is that a weakness of this film?
I don't know if I'd say it's too complicated, maybe perhaps a bit disjointed, in that the different parts of it coming together are not necessarily super obvious. I mean, the one thing I was thinking as a potential weakness when I was watching it was they kind of go from, all right, we're in this situation, we've got to go steal this thing, to like, okay, we're stealing this thing. Like there's not a lot of movies, there's more exposition there where you talk through like all of what you're going to do. Although in some ways, I don't know if that's a criticism, because they kind of reverse that usual trend by giving the exposition as they're doing it.
Yeah.
So like all the stuff is explained as it's happening. It's not like I have no idea what's happening. Why are they doing this? Like they talk through everything that's happening as it's happening.
And what was the movie I was watching the other day where I noticed that? I talked about very recently. I noticed them doing. Oh, it was The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. They used a similar structure in that with this one, where it's a pacing thing. Rather than explain it and then do it, when you intersperse those two things, it continues moving the pace of the movie moving forward, so you don't feel like you've slowed down and stopped. Which is one of the things we've liked about it, is the pacing of it. Yeah. So that's a fascinating. It's an interesting cinematographic choice and directorial choice to overlay those in that way. And I think it creates a level of intrigue on top of that.
I would also say I think the like believability of the love story angle is pretty low. Yeah. And I just think there's some movies where you don't really need that, but they seem like they try and put one in there anyway just to create this other kind of tension. And I don't think it's really necessary in this movie.
I agree. I don't think that particular scene, the romance between Tom Cruise and Emmanuel Barrett, I don't think it was necessary for the way the film plays out. They did try to hint at it, specifically right from the beginning of the movie, when he's like trying to wake her up and he's very concerned about her. Like you can see some of them attempting to build in some of that tension between the two of them. But yet the rest of the movie, it doesn't do a fantastic job of like making that super believable.
Yeah.
One of the criticisms of the Ethan Hunt character throughout the series is that some people feel as though his character is shallow because you don't have this massive built-in backstory for him. I was listening to Light the Fuse podcast, which is literally a podcast entirely devoted to the Mission Impossible series. But they asked this of one of the guys they were interviewing on this podcast, and he had a really interesting answer. I'm curious to think, what do you think about the character? Is it a shallow character? Does it lack? Is there something lacking in his character?
I mean, it's a shallow. I think it is a shallow character, but I also think it might not really matter.
Okay, elaborate on that.
Because the movie's not about, as much as we say the movie series would not succeed without Ethan Hunt, the movie series is also not about him. It's about what they're doing. So I don't think necessarily we need to know his entire life story. So I do think that some of the other action series have succeeded in telling life stories, and they make the movies deeper and more meaningful. So I think when you look at like Jason Bourne or you look at James Bond, obviously, you know way more about these characters and care for them on a more personal level. So I don't feel that when it comes to Mission Impossible and Ethan Hunt, but like I don't also think it necessarily matters a whole lot.
It's fascinating that you bring up Jason Bourne on this one, because Jason Bourne's entire character is about the fact that you don't know what his backstory is, and him trying to figure out his backstory. So what's cool about that is you're having to establish the audience's connection with the character without the backstory. And that's essentially what they're doing with the Ethan Hunt Mission Impossible, is they're establishing his connection to the audience, not through his backstory, but through the decisions he makes going forward. So you connect with his character because of how he interacts in the present as he goes through it, instead of what you think about where he came from. Which is a little bit about what this it's a writer. I think his name is Graham Moore. He's a writer, and he wrote the Imitation Game, the script for the Imitation Game, and I think he directed that or something. But and the Outfit, that just came out, he did that too. But he was saying sometimes people get lazy with the backstory because the backstories aren't that interesting. And Ethan Hunt's character is established. His who he is established by the decisions he makes, as opposed to where he came from necessarily. Which I think is a fascinating way to look at story. And especially now that we have 6 movies and we'll end up at least with 8 movies, he has made a lot of decisions over the years. And I think a lot of the key ones you see in here are establishing his character. Like when he goes to Jean Reno's character, is like 0 body count. Like that's establishing an ethic for him. Or how upset he is at his team, all of his team dying, establishes an ethic for him. So as you watch him interact with the world around him, it's establishing that character, as opposed to the traditional way we think about it, which is backstory, which I think it's a fascinating take. Any other weaknesses that you can come up with?
Nothing immediately springs to mind.
And I mean, I watched this movie originally as a early high school kid, as you did as well. And if I could follow it in early high school without feeling it was too confusing, I feel like, that shouldn't be a legitimate criticism of it. But I don't know. Some people don't like to think through movies. Okay. Let's go memorable scenes. Which scenes stick out to you as like incredibly memorable?
I mean, the scene I think the whole movie is based around, and the most memorable scene to me is the vault room.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The use of white and black. The aerobatics that are necessary in the scene, like you said, establishing different parts of what he does, and just the tension around that whole scene. And it's all happening in a room. That's the scene for me.
this is Mission Impossible, isn't it? Like, this is the essence of Mission Impossible. Like, doing this incredibly difficult, should be impossible task and doing it in an incredibly interesting, creative way. Like, that is the essence of what makes Mission Impossible different from, say, Bond films. That kind of ethos to the storyline. It's like, how are we going to do this incredibly difficult thing?
Yeah, because even if a drop of sweat gets on the floor, you're done.
Yeah. And it's such a great job, like how they set up how difficult it is, and watching you walk through that. And it's established by, like, I love that particular the moment where like the cup gets dripping on the floor. It's just in there to show you, like, this is real.
Yeah.
Like, this is a big deal. And it really is. It is one of the most memorable scenes of the entire series.
I mean, I love when the technician comes back in and sits down and the floor turns black, and you're like, if he just looked down, he would see the reflection above him. Like, he doesn't look down.
Yeah.
And it's that close to all being ruined.
Like, the tension that's created around that scene is fantastic. Oh, it's so good. So good. Yeah, that is the most memorable scene in the entire film. What else stuck out to you?
Do you have any?
I do. I think one of the other scenes for me is the scenes outdoors in Prague. Golitsyn gets the knockless, gets out. Like, I'll combine these into two. One is the elevator death scene, like the elevator death scene for Emilio Estevez, who, by the way, like, does a remarkable job in a very limited screen time. His character is highly memorable, given how little he's in that film.
Yeah.
But the scenes where they're walking, like they're in the streets of Prague, are fantastic. Like, in one scene, you have, I think it's Sarah, the character Sarah, Kristen Scott Thomas, like, as she's there by herself, and like the fog starts rolling in, and there's like blue light hanging out over there, and it, like, the tension is created as she's walking slowly down. Like, it's really memorable. You got the cobblestone streets of Prague with the fog rolling in, juxtaposed. It's very slow, and it's very, like, scenic as she's walking slowly towards Golitsyn, who's being stabbed.
Yeah.
Juxtaposed with Ethan Hunt running like his hair's on fire back and forth between all of his co-team members who were all getting murdered.
As Tom Cruise only knows how to run.
Yes, as establishing of her series, Tom Cruise running like a madman throughout the streets of some random city. But it's like, he runs just in time to watch somebody die, and then runs back to watch somebody else die, and then runs over there and stuff. So he's constantly just running around, getting there too late. And that juxtaposition between that and the Sarah character slowly walking through the fog streets is really, really cool. It's really cool, and I like it. Anything else?
Yeah, a lot of misdirection.
Yeah,
in that scene, which you end up seeing later, I think is a big strength
for sure
of it, and what part of what makes it a good scene.
Yeah, I like. And I think this is unique to this particular film, if I'm remembering correctly. But there is the classic James Bond technology scene. In the James Bond film, they always have a scene where they go visit Q, and Q explains all the new gadgets and devices and how they're going to work. There's a scene like that in that first Mission Impossible with Emilio Estevez's character. He's explaining the gum, the red and the green. He's explaining the cameras and the earpieces and all that technology. Like, that's a classic James Bond-esque, like, Q scene. And as far as I know, they don't have any other scenes in the rest of the film where they actually explain the technology. You usually just see it in action. Yeah. In particular, the revolving way in which they create face masks. That's kind of funny. They keep, like, advancing the technology of how they create face masks. But even that meme is established in this film. Yeah. And I think finally, like, the helicopter in the tunnel is pretty memorable. That's a pretty cool scene. Any quotes that stuck out to you? It's not a super quotable movie, but
not necessarily anything.
Yeah. I think the only ones that stuck out to me were the 0 body count and Kittredge, you've never seen me very upset. I think it was a pretty good line.
I mean, also establishing this message will self-destruct.
Yeah.
Is a pretty big thing, because that obviously becomes a huge part of and that's part of popular that particular phrase is part of popular culture when it comes to movies.
Yeah, of course that carries back to the TV show, but reestablishing that as a meme throughout the series is really good. I have some interesting facts and tidbits for you, and if you have any, you can pop in with this too. But I told you earlier about the interview I was listening to with the guy who wrote The Imitation Game. He admitted on this podcast that he absolutely used the scene where they find the Bible, and the Bible is the reveal of who the traitor is. He absolutely stole that scene for the Imitation Game and used that as the way to reveal the traitor in The Imitation Game. Nice. Another one is Tom Cruise, actually, when he was filming that famous vault scene, kept banging his head on the floor, which of course isn't going to work because you're trying to get him not to. And then he came up with the idea to put a bunch of coins in the front of his shoes to balance him out, because basically his head was too heavy and his feet were too light, and he kept banging his head. And so he ended up putting a whole bunch of coins in his shoes to kind of balance him out a little bit. Another interesting fact or tidbit. Do you know that by the time Dead Reckoning Part 1 comes out, Tom Cruise will be 3 years older than Jon Voight was in Mission Impossible? As kind of the old man veteran guy, Tom Cruise will be 3 years older than Jon Voight was when that movie was.
Jon Voight wished he looked like Tom Cruise and he was that old.
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple things going forward to Dead Reckoning. There's a scene that he uses in this one that he doesn't use in any of the other movies. That's actually going to be a part of his character that's coming back. Close-up magic.
Interesting.
He uses that thing where he does the hand tricks with the discs. They're actually going to be bringing back the Ethan Hunt does close-up magic in Dead Reckoning. And then one last thing. There are several side characters from Mission Impossible that are coming back for Dead Reckoning Part 1 and 2.
Interesting.
Do you want to guess as to which ones, or do you not want to know?
I don't want to know.
Okay. All right. Yes. So there are several ones that were just in this film that are not in any of the other films.
Very interesting.
Who are coming back for either Part 1 or Part 2. So this is another reason why you need to watch Mission Impossible. Do you want to do ranking on this one as to where this one ranks in your list, or do you want to save that for the end?
I've only rewatched the first.
All right, so let's save that one to the end. Let's save that one to later date when we get closer. All right, that's our review of Mission Impossible. So thank you for checking that out.
Dun, dun, dun.
This is where I would love to overlay, but I'm not sure what the copyright things are. So if you hear it in there, then hopefully I figure that out.
Copyright takedown for my poor notes of the Mission Impossible thing.
All right, so let's move on to our watch list. Movies we watched over the last week. Rob, what'd you watch?
So recently we had watched Silence of the Lambs. We talked about Silence of the Lambs, and so I actually watched the other two movies that came out in succession of that. So Hannibal was considered the direct sequel to Silence of the Lambs, although Jodie Foster was replaced in that movie as the main character, although still Clarice Starling. She's played by someone else. I do think the movie is really good, and I think one of the reasons why I said that Hannibal Lecter is the best bad guy in movie history is because of the extension of his character that we see in these two movies. Yeah. And it is very interesting that they came out 1 year after each other, and Hannibal is the direct sequel to it, but there's also Red Dragon, which is the other one that I watched, which is not a direct sequel to Hannibal. In fact, it is a prequel to Hannibal. Yeah. But they came out pretty close to each other. They were a year and a half in between them. And Red Dragon has Ray Fiennes as the bad guy, and he's fantastic in it, as he is fantastic in everything, in my opinion. And it does the two movies together do a really good job of teaching you more about who Hannibal Lecter is as a person. Yeah. and just how intelligent he is and how terrifying that is. Yeah. And we talked about Ethan Hunt as Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt, and Anthony Hopkins is absolutely Hannibal Lecter. There's no one else who could be that character with that skill.
Yeah.
And so I enjoy both these movies, and if you have not seen them, I would recommend seeing them. I'm actually planning on reading the book Red Dragon this next month. So
I've seen Red Dragon character in multiple iterations, both in the Hannibal TV show and Red Dragon. I just don't love the Red Dragon storyline. I mean, the actors who have played them have all been good and have represented the character well. I don't love the Red Dragon storyline as much as I love the rest of the series. So it's always been like one of the lower ones for me because I just like the other stuff better. I don't know exactly what it is about that. Maybe I'll think about that as to exactly what it is. I
think it's definitely it's a bit out there as far as like someone being that far into their psychosis, whatever you want to call it, to do some of the things that the character does.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's a very interesting character that Thomas Harris created.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, and I think both movies are quality movies. And the one scene in particular that gives me chills is when Hannibal Lecter's character is making Ray Liotta's character, the bad guy, eat his own brain.
Yeah. That's a disturbing one, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. There's so many in Hannibal, there's so many good scenes like you just know he's gonna kill this guy, and he's like, he's walking into the trap, and like you can see it coming. It's like the classic horror genre trope where like everyone knows what's about to happen, and so the tension is built in the fact that you know what's going to happen and waiting for it to happen. Yeah. Anything else, or was that
okay? Those were the two I remember. I was supposed to see Evil Dead Rise, but did not see that.
First one, I watched Speed, the classic 1990s action movie, Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves, and it's still good. I still like it. It holds up. It's a great action movie. It's one of those classic keep the tension going constantly. I do think it feels like it has like 4 endings instead of like, I think it cut out 1 or 2 of the endings and it might have been a better film, but it's still really good. For last week's weekly movie challenge, I like the challenge from the Twitter feed weekly movie challenge was to watch a film about obsession. So I've been wanting to rewatch Black Swan. So I rewatched Black Swan, and it really is a fascinating movie. Darren Aronofsky directs it, Natalie Portman and Mila Kunis, and it's about an obsessive ballerina who is utterly obsessed with perfection, combined with as she slowly descends into madness. And so it really does a fantastic job of blurring that line between attempting to be perfect and actually crossing the line into madness, and watching her slowly descend in there, not being able to tell what's real and what's not. And you can see like she has a really, really dysfunctional relationship with her mother. So like you can see where her character is getting this from. And the way Aronofsky portrays that is really, really interesting. So it's a fascinating psychological movie. Got anything else?
I do not.
All right. Thank you. This is the show. Make sure you check out filmforfans.com for all of our great content, including our review of Mission Impossible. That will be up on the website here in the next week or so, and all of our great content. Until next time, enjoy the movies.